So, folks, what I have up here on the screen now is uh, the the image that I use for the podcast. It just says "Social Theory with David McKerracher." There's a bunch. It's almost like one of these sort of bubble maps. You see bubbles. You see concepts. A concept map. You just see concepts all over the place, like PCFM, time energy, mode of production, totalization, political phenomenology, critical media theory, double consciousness, ressentiment, episteme, etc., etc., etc. Capital, labor power, value. So there's words all over it, and then there's also black and white thinkers all around it. But then there's also some colored photos, and each one of those photos is one that I'll return to with my students frequently. And this all ties into the zone of interest in a few ways. But like, I just want to describe what a few of these photos are for people who are just listening to this, say on Spotify in the future. We have the little girl who is picking coffee beans in Guatemala. We have the fathers walking through the sugarcane fields in Belize. We have the iconic military man standing in front of a tank, securing our freedom. And then we have down here at the bottom a couple little African boys in a pit, in a mine. They're mining cobalt for your iPhone, right? But of course, I don't want to just highlight the marginalized others, Oriental others. I also wanted to do something, where I have who Democrats tend to overlook, which is right here. You got the trucker, and he's hugging his kids goodbye because he's going to be driving across country for a couple months, and so the kids are crying as they say goodbye to their dad. These are examples I like to hit on in my lectures. Child slavery is part of what gets bracketed out. Like it's a lot more common for people to talk about how climate change is what gets bracketed out when you're standing there in the grocery store aisle. But child slavery is also getting bracketed out when you're standing there on the grocery store aisle, right? So anyway, bringing it back around to the center. In the center here, we have a bubble, and inside the bubble is Americana suburbia, the sort of beautiful, almost kind of, I don't know, this looks kind of like McCall, Idaho. You know what I mean? Like a touristy kind of town, alpine, like maybe a ski resort town. You got some hot air balloons over it, but it's like this. It's like the fantasy of the suburbs, not like the lame suburbs. This is like the beautiful suburbs, but it's inside of a rose tinted bubble, right? That's inside of that bubble is the zone of interest for Americans, whether you belong to the middle class or not. The fantasy of the good life is this one that Hollywood has provided for us, of a certain kind of middle class life. And that's what's inside the bubble. And of course, a lot of my students are coming to college in the hopes of securing for themselves in their future this kind of life. And I'm not against them achieving that kind of life. I actually hope that they do. I don't think that they should have to live like Diogenes, but I do want them to think about the conditions of possibility for this fantasy. And also, if that fantasy is unrealistic, if it's a sort of perfectionist expectation that's not keeping up with the changes, the material, political, economic developments in, for instance, the housing market, the job market, etc., then I do want them to think about how, if they have this sort of middle-class Americana sort of vision for what their life is going to be like, is it realistic? So there's that. Is it realistic? And the other side of it is also, what's necessary for maintaining that lifestyle? And so, of course, we have these various metonyms for the global system of production, being the girls picking the coffee beans, the father who's leaving the kids, the Belizean farmers, the African miners, and of course, our troops, our brothers and sisters who are trying to survive in today's society, and so they've enlisted. We should just instead. I don't like this language of our troops, because I don't feel like this. I don't feel like they're not mine, but the people in the military are our friends and are our family members. So with all that said, what's kind of mind-blowing, though, is though I talk about the mode of production and the relations of production and the horizon of possibilities, all relating to these sort of instances. So we can't think about our horizon of possibilities without thinking about our place in the relations of production. And we can't think about that without the global mode of production. And I always tie it back to these concrete examples. The students will still say stuff like when I have them write up something to talk about where they see themselves in 10 years. And then the next question is like asking them to situate their career that they see themselves entering over the next 10 years. I'll say situate yourself in the relations of production. How does your career that you're looking to do relate to the mode of production? And what they do is that, like, this is so common that it's actually kind of mind-blowing. They'll say, well, I aim to be a manager, or I aim to be a professional in this kind of a context, and so I will be consulting with these kinds of people, and I'll be having meetings with these kinds of people, and I'll be over this kind of person, and I'll be helping solve problems for this kind of person. So like they usually are thinking within the scope of the institution or organization that they seek to occupy in the near future. They're thinking about the limited field outside of the broader field. And so what I'll always say in the margins is you're missing the child slavery part. Like, remember how we keep talking about that part? That's, you gotta expand out and think about the global mode of production. I'm not even looking for them to write a whole paragraph about it, but they do actually have to say how the position they're looking to fill relates to those other actually existing positions that are just a presupposed necessity for the maintenance of our current world order. And to me, there's nothing more American than your zone of interest reliably bracketing out these other parts of the process.